Welcome, gamers, to Basement Arcade Pause Menu, the show where we hit pause, sit back, and just chill. I'm your host, Ben Magnet, and today on the show, guys, I'm still kind of geeking out a little bit that I have this gentleman on the show. Oh, as you may or may not have known, you probably do know if you follow me on social media. A few months ago, I went to Japan, and when I came back, I had the privilege to go to Burbank, California, and play a game that I bought the night before I left for Japan. That game is Sonic Roll, and I am talking to the game designer of the game, the guy who made the dang thing, and a game designer at Tesco, Mr. Anthony Thorp. Anthony, how are you, sir? How's it going?
Hello, I'm doing good. Thanks for having me.
Oh, dude, thank you for, let's see, first of all, making it awesome, my new favorite board game. Secondly, for agreeing to come on the show. And three, just for answering me back.
Yeah, of course, my pleasure.
Oh, man. So I have a ton of questions about Sonic Roll, but since this is your first time on Pause Menu, I always ask a first-time guest this one simple question. How did you get into video games?
So when I was just a kid, some of my first memories are my dad got a Super Nintendo from my
Nice.
grandma, and we would play Super Mario World together. He didn't like video games when I got older, but when I was a little kid, he would play that with me all the time, that and like Donkey Kong. And
Ooh.
so that's what kind of got me started with gaming, and from there I never stopped.
So you started with a Super Nintendo. For someone who made a board game called Sonic Roll, I always assumed that you started off with a Sega Genesis. How did you get into the Genesis?
So it's actually funny. I was the Nintendo kid growing up. I
Oh.
had the Super Nintendo, the N64, the GameCube, and that. But my best friend and my neighbor, he was the Genesis kid. He was a huge Sonic fan. He had a Dreamcast, when that came out, whatnot. And so we would go over each other's houses all the time. We'd basically live at each other's houses during the summer, and we would play Sonic 3 and Knuckles on a yearly basis on the regular. And so when the games came out, started coming out in Nintendo systems, like when Sonic Mega Collection came out, Sonic Adventure 2, I played Sonic DX as soon as it came out in the GameCube. I continued to play Sonic games because I always still enjoyed them.
Nice. So that's funny because you starting off as a Nintendo kid and now obviously working at Kess making board games based off of Sonic characters. Part of me is just like, what, traitor? But I mean, of course, when I was a kid, I never owned any consoles until the PlayStation. I mean, Game Boy technically, but that's another debate for handhelds v consoles. But when I was a kid, my next door neighbor, he had a Sega Genesis, and it's all his fault, pretty much, for me doing all of this, and it's all his fault. It's all Sonic's fault. So, besides video games, how did you get into board games? Was there like a love of board games before you started designing at Kess, or was there always like this fascination with board games?
So board games kind of came about. Like I had a love of like gaming. Like at first it was just I played games a lot as a kid. I'd play as much as I could, run down to the video store, get anything I could to play. And then when my family finally got a computer, it started like there are programs you could get on the computer where you could actually make games, which as a little kid I thought that was awesome. Like I got RPG Maker 95 when we finally got a family computer, and I got to mess around with that, which started letting me like play around with the like mechanisms of how a game worked, and I always found that like extremely fascinating. So I kept working on that all throughout like middle school, even high school. And then board games, I started working on board games because it was something I felt was possible to do on my own. Video games can be, earlier on it's a lot easier now to get into that as a solo dev, but they were intimidating to try to do something like that all on your own. And I didn't know that much programming at the time. And I used to play a game called Pinochle. I'm from the Midwest, and so we play a lot of trick-taking games like euchre. But my grandparents and my aunt, I would go over there every weekend and play Pinochle with them. And so my first game is actually a trick-taking card game. It's called Tome. And I wanted to make a game that I could play feasibly with my aunt and my grandparents. And so that was actually one of the games that helped me get into Kess. My partner, she did all the artwork for Tome, and she got hired as a graphic designer there. And then that kind of gave me an in to talk to them when they started getting more heavily into board games, because they're originally a toy company, But
Hmm.
the owner, he's a big fan of board games. He's a big fan of Magic, and he wanted to do more board games. So I got to go to Gen Con with them. We got to kind of sell our game, and it did well enough that and it was the right moment that got me an in, and that let me continue to work on board games.
Wow. Okay, that's really interesting. So I'm not from the Midwest, obviously. Like the second you said playing Pinnacles, like that's my mother is from Montana. I don't know if she ever played Pinochle though, to be perfectly honest. But that's just something that's like, wow, that is the most one of the most Midwest things I've ever heard anyone say.
Yeah.
No, I apologize if that sounds like I'm throwing a shade. It's not. I promise you, it's not.
No, I trust me, I get it. Like it's so funny out there. Like it's I'll say euchre, and out in Michigan it's like a religion, but out here it's like no one. I say trick taking game. They're like, what is that? I've never heard of that.
Mhm. Yeah, because I do remember when I was younger, when we would go visit my grandparents in Montana, it wasn't Pinochle that we would play. It was actually Mexican train dominoes.
Mm.
Oh, we would like the whole family for a good like 3 or 4 years. Every time we would go visit my grandparents up in Montana, we would be playing. Like there was one time my own family bought a whole big set of dominoes specifically for that, and it was like the biggest hit ever.
Mm. I didn't play too much dominoes. My grandma had this little book that had like a bunch of beads and dominoes and whatnot. There was like a board game book. I remember
Hmm.
growing up when went to visit
Oh,
her. It was really interesting. It actually had like a bunch of black and white beads, and like each page was a different game. I remember playing with that
ooh.
like a ton whenever I'd go over there.
You know what? That sounds so familiar. I feel like I know what you're talking about. I don't know where I've seen. I don't know if it's the mandala effect or what it is, but I do remember seeing some sort of book, and I do remember like those beads or the like Mancala, that game where you like take the stones and you drop them off in each little thing, and you land and you have to
Yes, yeah, I think it's called
and
Mandala.
Mandala Mancala. I don't know. That
Yeah,
one famous that one. I remember seeing some sort of book. I think I know what you're talking about, but I don't. It's like I see it, but at the same time I don't see it. You know what I'm talking about? It's okay.
but yeah, I know what you mean. Yeah, like and I my aunt had all sorts of like old games like that. She had like Parcheesi. She was a big fan of backgammon. That was her favorite. So I played some of like the older games with them.
Nice. So moving on to Sonic Roll. Now this game is, to be honest, I was so happy when I first came across this. I think I came across this game first as an Instagram ad. So whoever's working at Kesta, they got me. You guys got me. Dang it. So, pardon the pun. What was the genesis behind Sonic Roll?
So because Kess is a toy company primarily, they will work with a lot of license product, and they were talking to Sega at the time, and it is kind of a funny story because me and my partner, we were out at a convention, taking a little vacation, and then we got a call, and our boss is like, "Oh yeah, so we sold the Sonic game," and I'm like, "Sold the Sonic game? What Sonic game? We don't have a Sonic game. What are you talking about?" And apparently, one of the buyers was really interested in Sonic because it's a hot license. It's a big property. And so when I got back, it was like just immediately boots on the ground because we had to go because there was a deadline. But because I was the biggest Sonic fan in the room, I was like, please, I'll take this. This is definitely an opportunity I want to be a part of, and that was the beginning of it all. We
Hmm.
it came with it's we have something that we need to get done, and here's the timeline to do it. But my goal the entire time, like the reason I wanted to do it so bad, is because like I said, I had grown up playing these games. It was classic Sonic was the license we got for this one, and they
Okay.
had already Kess had the Mega Man and the Contra board games, so we were starting to build this line of retro video games, and so it made sense to make a game that harkened back to the old Genesis games. And it started with a simple idea of just rolling dice and kind of using those dice to move along a path was the
Hmm.
original idea. It took a lot of iteration and whatnot, but that was where it all started.
Okay. So, because when it comes to licensed board games and the people who make them, there's all these. I feel like there's all these different avenues that the game could take. Because I was like, I'm not gonna lie, I was thinking about when our conversation before we obviously sat down and started talking, because I didn't know if Roll was like a different board game and then it became a Sonic game. So hearing that it became a Sonic game right from the get go, to me is just fascinating. Because especially with licenses, because I'm not in that world, I don't know how it goes. And I didn't realize that Kess made a Mega Man game until I think I was scrolling on Amazon. I was like, oh yeah, we also have a Mega Man game, and that's not in my collection yet, but it will be.
Yeah. So the interesting thing is the Mega Man and the Contra game are actually they were through a different partnership that had
Hmm.
like different designers. This was one of the first big projects we had in house. Like I worked on a Spy X Family game. That was the first game, which is a lot lighter card game.
Uh-huh.
And that was our first in house. Well, that and we have another kind of a no IP. It's a prompt response game like Apples to Apples games called Murder. We wrote that was our first in house game, and then Spy,
Hmm.
and then Sonic was the next project. But this is a much bigger project. Um, but yeah, my philosophy behind it and what I thought was important is because a lot of times licensed games will just do that. They will, they'll either be something that they're just adapting an already existing game engine and putting that on, or there just isn't the passion or the time behind it. For numerous factors, working with licenses can be for better or worse. A different
Right.
beast than working on your own. But I thought it was really important that we make a game that felt like Sonic from the ground up. So a lot of the
Hmm.
first month, while the original game engine was kind of coming in, clicking into place, I was doing as much research as I could. I was playing through all the old games again. And, I played through Sonic enough that it's like I know what the vibe and what the feel of the game was, but I really wanted to like capture the essence of what actually makes these games interesting to play, and then how do I adapt that to a board game as opposed to a video game because it's a completely different medium with completely
Hmm.
different things you can do. And so getting capturing the essence and the feel of what makes Sonic fun, but bringing it to this new medium was my goal from the beginning.
Yeah, and then also one thing I must praise you and the team at Kess for it is that it's not those standard license. I don't want to say standard license because every board game is different. Every game designer is different. But when I say this, I'm thinking back to like the early '80s, or the late '80s, early '90s, when a popular IP would get a board game, which was essentially like race to the finish, roll dice. You get essentially it's like I don't want to say Candyland, but kind of like Candyland in a way, where like
Yeah,
if you land on a certain space, you may draw a card and something good or something bad would happen, something like that. So with Sonic Roll, where because when I play tested with you specifically, at the event a few months ago in Burbank, and even when I've been playing with my friends, it does feel like racing through the zones of trying to get the dice to like place it in the right spot to make sure we know where we're going, or reach the end and avoid the badniks as much as humanly possible.
yeah, it was like I said, it came from a lot of research. Like board game design has just evolved a lot since like the early '90s. There was the major board games for the most part that everybody knew that everyone's grown up with, like Monopoly and all that stuff. And the design of those are old, and we've learned so much from that, and there's a lot
Hmm.
to draw from now. There's all these different types of games with different components and whatnot. That was another interesting thing about working on this game is that you have to really like consider the components you're working with and figure out how to
Right.
work with them. Like dice are little random number generators essentially, and there's a lot of things you can do with them. You can just
Hmm.
use them as I need a random number, and the bigger it is, the better. But a lot of times that's where the feeling of like, oh, this is too lucky. Like I just rolled unlucky here, and it felt bad. And so, we wanted to move away from that. We wanted to capture the feeling of pushing yourself and going fast like Sonic is. The edge of the screen is always coming at you when you're going full speed. And, a little mistake can be the difference between, a high score or a low score and your speed score. And how do we capture that in this game and make it feel like that, even though you're taking turns. Like board games aren't really associated with speed usually,
Hmm.
so that was an interesting challenge for this one. And again, it's about like not being too literal,
Right.
I think there's a tendency to take things extremely literally at first when you're trying to come up with components, and you want to like abstract things and think about what would feel fast as opposed to actually like being fast, like rolling dice over and over again.
Right. Yeah. So so one of the questions I've been dying to ask you is what was the process of designing a game like Sonic Roll? Because like you said earlier, you heard from Kess that they sold the Sonic game, and you're like, wait, what? And you come into work that weekend, or not that weekend. Wow, that'd be terrible. You come into work that week, and all of a sudden, it's like, okay, we need a Sonic game. Good luck, and you're like, just like, So how was the process of designing it, testing it, and essentially, I assume Sega had to approve like the final product, correct?
Yes, they did. And when you're working with licensors, usually they want to approve everything. Lucky for
Hmm.
us, Sega is really actually very good to work with. They're very helpful. Some licensors will be like, you'll give them some. They'll be like, okay, well, when it's all done, show us, and then you'll do it, and then they're like, oh, it's all wrong, do it again.
Okay.
But they worked with us throughout the process. The people we communicated with at Sega were extremely responsive and very helpful. Where we love working with them because they are one of the best licensors to work with as far as getting stuff approved. They have a few rules, so we would just check in with them to make sure we had things going in the way that they thought was best or that Sonic Team would be okay with. But for the most
Hmm.
part, they kind of let us, do what we needed to do. Um, but yeah, so we came back from that trip and we needed a Sonic game. We had a few months to do it. So it
Okay.
starts off with, like a lot of my job is doing the core mechanic of coming up with like how the game actually functions. Like when you take away the aesthetic, what are you doing? How does everything go together? And it's funny, one of the first ideas that we had, like a lot of the early ideas didn't quite make it in, they evolved, but the way Blue Sphere works has pretty much been consistent the whole time.
Hmm.
I've always been a big fan of Blue Sphere. It's like one of the things I always think about when I think about Sonic 3 and Knuckles, and it's always been my favorite bonus level. Like the half pipe was always such a pain in the butt to me from Sonic 2. Like I can never get the Chaos Emeralds in that game, but in Sonic 3 and Knuckles, I will be supersonic by the end of Hydro City. Usually, I have that game
I
memorized.
I cannot tell you how long, how many years it took me to be blue sphere level once. Just a sphere level. Because when I was a kid, because I didn't own a Genesis, my mom bought me the Sonic and Knuckles collection on PC, and I would play with my little brother, and we would just be going, we would go into town. We would have an amazing time. But every time we got to this blue sphere, I just could not. And I wouldn't say that I was good at video games, but when I played this, I was a kid. I don't know, maybe second, third, first grade around there. I just never could get it. And then finally, when I was a sophomore in college, I finally retried it and I beat it. And I'm just like, so that's how you get the Chaos Emeralds in this game. I was so mad. So hearing that you could become supersonic at Hydro City, I am just, let's just say the gamer in me is a little mad. Not at you, mad myself, because I'm just like,
I mean, it took years and years of practice to get there, but like yeah, it's funny you say that because my partner, she had never played a Sonic game before,
ooh,
um, and she's leaving right now. I love you. Have fun. She'd never played a Sonic game before, and so she played through Sonic Mania
okay.
while we were doing this because she did a lot of the art and the graphic design for the game. She's our art director. Um,
Give her the
and yeah,
biggest thumbs up for me because I love the art of this game.
I will do. She she could not beat Blue Sphere either. She would get so angry trying to do the Blue Sphere levels. Like she got through everything else. She beat the game, beat the Titanic Monarch Zone, but yeah, she could not get any of the Chaos Emeralds. I think she eventually, or no, yeah, no, you get the Chaos Emeralds from the UFO. She would always go into Blue Sphere because in that, yeah, I think you just get medals and Sonic
Yeah, you
Mania.
get medals for Blue Sphere. I think from for Mania, Blue Sphere is
It's the goalpost one.
yeah, it's the Blue
Yeah.
Sphere is the goal post, and you get medals. Pardon me, and those medals unlock other goodies.
Yes, yeah, yeah. But she'd always want to do it. She always tried to do Blue Sphere. She eventually got one, and she was so proud of herself. Um, but yeah, she it was just like this mini game is insane. I don't know how to do it. Like it's too fast for me. I actually I
Yeah,
hear that a lot. Like I'm so used to it. At this point, like I have been playing it since I was just a small child. So like to me, it's like the back of my hand. But anybody who's not used to it will. They always talk about how it's too fast, it's too quick, it's too disorienting. But yeah, that was like one of the things I really wanted to be in it, and I thought of like, okay, this could kind of be a fun mini game like this, like the red spheres send you out, the bumper spheres let you have another go. Originally, they didn't give you power ups, and we needed a reason to make the bonus level just advantageous whenever you go there. So we're like, well, what if you
hmm
just get something every time you go? But the more you go, the closer you get to that Chaos Emerald. So that idea, it's funny in that it survived pretty much the entire design process. A lot of the other things, like the early ideas, where like everyone would roll together at the same time, and you'd all place dice at the same time down this track, and you're all just trying to survive as long as you can before everyone has to re-roll. That was like one of the original first ideas.
hmm
And then there's just a lot of evolution. At one point, people were like, it was about taking like a long turn and trying to like trade your dice to keep going, and there were certain things that just like it was like we were getting closer each time, but things weren't clicking. And then one of my game devs, she was talking about a game she used to play with her parents a lot, called Sharpshooters, and it's a game where like you're kind of like trying to play as many dice as you can without busting and not trying to set up other people to complete tracks. And so I
hmm
listened to that and I thought about that and I thought about everything we had done. And that's when we tried kind of the current structure. We had these three tracks with the different paths, and you could get as far as you could, and if you get the card, you get a reward. But if you're playing competitively, you don't want to set people up. If you're playing cooperatively, then you can set people up so you can all get through the zones faster. And that's when things really started to take hold. After that, we could design the badniks that made sense and the power ups that made sense and all that stuff. But it took to getting there to really start moving the game forward.
Okay. And I will say this: this is the one time where Blue Sphere Zone or the Blue Spheres were one of my favorite parts of a Sonic game, and not the ones that's like, and not the one that I wouldn't say Blue Sphere would give me not anxiety. That's the wrong word. It would frustration. That's the right one because, your partner said, there are parts of Blue Spheres that it speeds up half like in like certain times, and at one point you are going super fast. It's really hard to control, and then next thing you know, you meant to go right, but you accidentally go left, or you just put it one pixel short, and then next thing you know, you hear the brrr, and you're back at the start. So I will say the times I have played Sonic Roll, and I told him about the going to Blue Sphere and how that's the special zone. That's where you get the Chaos Emerald. Oh, we would all try to go there as hard. Like the second we see something that had like it's like we try to complete the card that got us to the ring, or if we saw a ring on a zone card, trajectory to the end, we would try our hardest to get there because we want to go to Blue Sphere. And we loved Blue Sphere, to be perfectly honest. We absolutely adore that spot.
Yeah, I'm glad. I wanted to capture all the fun and not the frustration of going to the
Yeah.
bonus level.
Yeah, and also I have to say thank you for adding the power ups because that makes life a whole lot easier.
Yeah,
I
and
mean,
the thing about like everything in the game, all the individual cards and whatnot, is once we had that core system, it's like that's when I could really think about Sonic and be like, okay, like how do you get power ups in Sonic? Like what are the power ups and how do I make them feel like that particular power up? Uh, but also work in this board game. Anyway, like designing the shields were really fun. Like the Thunder Shield actually had a different effect for a long time until like almost the last minute, and I couldn't think of
mhm.
something. I was like, this is like fine. It's like okay. And then I came up with that effect at the end where you can change reward into the two rings, and that one I was like, okay, actually that's like a really cool use of the game system. Like the longer a lot of times when you're making a board game or any game really, letting the game kind of find itself and design itself, I think is something that happens in any game when you're designing. Is you just start to realize like, oh, when you put this stuff together like this can happen, and you can start really leaning into the things that game is doing that other games don't do because they have different components. And so
Mhm.
designing the Thunder Shield at the end, like that was one of my favorite I think power ups I made because it feels so cool and so unique to the game.
Oh, That is right. I think my personal favorite shield is the fire shield, but I don't know if I got the fire shield. I just know that every time I get a shield while I'm playing Sonic Roll, I try to hoard that sucker for as long as possible. Because badniks, they pop up almost every other thing, and there are times where where I play the game, I have like 2 or 3 badniks up, and I'm just staring at them, and I'm just going, you guys.
Yeah,
Um,
it's definitely nice to be protected.
yeah, definitely. So, let's talk about those badniks for a second. How long did it take for the badniks to start showing up in the game design process? I assume that you wanted some form of badniks in the game when you first thought of it, but how long did it take for you to find the groove with the badniks?
They did take a long time. They were one of the last things that started shaping up because it was tough to figure out what made sense
Mm-hmm.
for the systems that were evolving. Like, as we went on, the idea of rolling dice and putting them down along a track has always kind of been consistent, but how that played out was iterated on. But the Badniks had a bunch of different roles throughout the different designs.
Mm-hmm.
Early on, they were kind of almost like a good thing to have in front of you because you could use them to change your dice to try to keep your turn going. And it didn't feel right that badniks were like only helpful and everyone could attack each other's badniks, and it was more about like trying to blow up someone else's badniks before they could to get the score. So they had a ton of evolution. They were pretty challenging to figure out exactly like what were they for, what could they do, and then when we switched to the kind of the final version, at first they would go onto a route and block dice there, but we found it just like was really difficult to pay attention to like, oh, I wasn't supposed to be able to spend a die there, right? Like, oh, the badnik is there. So how do we make a badnik that doesn't feel like there's not too much to keep track of, because it's not a video game. You have to do it all yourself. It's a board game. And so you want to keep in mind like the mental load that a player has while they're trying to play through the game. And when we finally had this system where the badniks were in front of you, they hindered you. It was a pretty easy check, like, oh, did I take damage? Because that's its own thing. As you're re-rolling, you'll remember to do that, and then go into actually playing. And then once we got there, that's when it started feeling right. And once we leaned into the dice have these different cool effects, like it helped give the red dice their identity of they can always get rid of badniks. That's why they're good. Like
Mm-hmm.
there'll always be like you can run or jump past them because that is a big part of Sonic. A lot of times you see a badnik, you're just like, I'm flying by. I ain't have time for this.
Yeah.
So it let us really hello there, honey. It let us really make badniks that felt authentic, and it opened up even more design process having like the 2 tracks on them to where you can make cool things like this one you can get rid of with a yellow, but it attacks yellow or stuff like that. You can make it so that there's never just like a safe roll, right? Like if
Mm-hmm.
you choose to ignore it, the badnik is annoying you, but if you choose to deal with it, it might be risking damaging you and whatnot. So giving the player interesting choices, like letting them choose how they want to risk their own dice, how they want to roll this turn in order to set themselves up for the best part of success. That's where the badniks finally fell into their own. And then
Mm-hmm.
as we got more and more experience with designing them, we figured out what made extremely like interesting effects for the badniks. There are some that I'm like, wow, this is a cool badnik. I'm glad we came up with this. And once we got
Okay.
there, I was happy with them.
So, because you mentioned earlier when you were talking about the design of the game that everyone would take dice and just roll it all at once before it was like Sonic, take Knuckles, Tails, Amy. The characters of the Sonic roll that would go on and move. Was there a mechanic that you absolutely loved when you first started designing and testing the game, but you either had to nerf or get rid of as testing went on because it was either just too powerful or too busted in the players, not in the players' favor. Saying that like there was a badnik that was just the second you drew it, everyone would just groan because they were like, "Oh, not this guy." It's like for example, Caterkiller really bleep this guy. I just like whoever drew the Caterkiller is just like, I hate you so much. Was there anything like that in designing of the game, or did everyone just was like, okay, yeah, we can do X, Y, and Z, and things were ironed out quickly?
I don't think there were any particular in this one, at least, because I have run into that before, where there's effects where you just like, I think it happens to every game design where you come up with something cool and you fight so hard, you're willing to warp the entire core system in order to keep it in. And once you get there, you have to take a step back and say, okay, this is a cool idea. Maybe I need to put it in a notebook for the game that's right for it. Because
Hmm.
I say a lot of times, like, a game can't just be a good idea. It has to be a bunch of good ideas working together. If you have two good ideas that are just at odds with each other, then you just have a bad idea. So sometimes you do have to take a step back. I don't particularly remember anything in this game that I was like, wow, how can I save this thing? Please, I need to keep it. There were a lot of things that definitely needed to change. Like there are ideas that you don't see like the earlier versions of. You just see the evolution of it. Like drop dash worked very differently at the beginning. It was I think you originally rolled two dice, so like two yellow, but every time you spent a yellow, you got two blue. And we found that that got out of control really quickly,
Hmm.
and so that had to change to the current system and whatnot. But most of the time, it's tweaks. The biggest problem with Badniks was figuring out the ratio. It was interesting. At first, it was like, okay, obviously it should just be you land on a Badnik space, you get a Badnik. But we
Hmm.
found it was really, really easy to deal with Badniks at that point. They didn't feel like a hindrance. They just felt like something that you get to put one dice on each turn. It was almost like an extra spot a lot of times, unless it was a really bad effect. And so then we're like, okay, well, when someone lands on a Badnik spot, then everybody draws Badnik. And that was crazy. That got out of control extremely quickly. So it was figuring out that middle ground. It's not. I don't think it's the most elegant solution I've ever come up with, but I do think it works in this game the way the Badniks are divvied out because I think that it sets a good ratio no matter what player count. Which a lot of times the player count scalability can be hard to figure out in a game.
Hmm.
Like that is another thing. Like when everyone was drawing a bad nick when it was two players, that was fine. But when everyone was drawing a bad nick at four players, that was much less fine.
Right. Yeah, because I have to say, drawing a bad like when you draw a bad nick and someone else has to draw a bad nick, because this is a co-op game. That's another thing I want to talk about in a little bit is how Sonic Roll is a co-op game. It's not really a competitive game per se. So it does help. Where especially one of the things I do love about this game is that you're not scheming or plotting against other players. It's like because when I last time I played this with some of my D&D friends when one of us drew a bad nick, we were always like, okay, who has what bad nicks? And we would all like sound off what bad nicks we have. It's like, okay, they have two, she has two, so and so has one. Can you please take this bad nick? It's like, yeah, I could take this bad nick, no problem. And then we would work together to try and get through the bad nick or advance through the game.
Yeah, it's really funny. I see that a lot of times at conventions when we're doing our demos and whatnot. A lot of times the people will talk about like, oh, who can handle this bad nick? Oh, I'm Knuckles, I got this, or I'm Amy, give it to me, I can handle it. But then you get the some groups of friends who you can tell they are all about like competition no matter what. And so you'll see them try to use the bandits to one up on each other or something like that, which is funny too. I kind of hope that most people would play it cooperatively. Like I wanted to make a game like that. That was the design, but I also wanted to give the people if you wanted to have a little friendly competition, you could do that. And like I feel like it's easy enough to ignore if you don't like that. And a lot of people will say like, "Oh, we just like to play as a full co-op game," which I think is completely valid. I think like it is designed in a way that it is a fun thing to come together and try to beat. But I also like, I feel like there's just the Sonic characters like Sonic and Knuckles and whatnot have that friendly rivalry, and so kind of putting that into the game was something I wanted to do.
Yeah, and one thing I do really enjoy is that because the times I played it, it is a co-op game, but there is a little bit of an competitive element. The first time I played it with my fiance and my roommate, he was definitely trying to go after as many bad nicks as humanly possible because he was playing as Knuckles, and he was looking at the point system, and he was like, I want to try to get as many points as possible, as many rings as possible, and I was saying, it's like, remember, this is a co-op. We're all trying to be together to beat the boss. And he was like, true, but I really want to win.
Yeah, well, that's what we always say when we're showing off is that there's a score at the end and you can see who won the most. That's how we always
Mm-hmm.
like to word it.
So, how did Sonic Roll become a co-op game? Was it always a co-op game when you first got the idea for it, or did it eventually become a co-op game?
So because of our Mega Man and Contra game, which I had, I played and studied, and because we're building this retro line, and actually we have some other games. We have some older games that also are cooperative games. I thought that this retro line we're building, it is like a nice space we're carving out in this cooperative, like old retro video game style game. So I wanted to emulate that. I wanted to make a game that was another cooperative one. You could come together with friends. I it was an early on decision. Like I always knew it was going to be co-op, but whether or not it was going to have that competitive element, I thought about, and that I kind of had to design around. I also like it let me easily put in the competitive mode at the end, where if you want to play where it like scores, the only thing that matters, that was such an easy change. It's just a few lines in the rule book, but the game still works just the same. And actually, what I like about like a few of the games I've designed is when different modes will give a different context to cards, like when you're playing fully competitive, because you can have infinite time tokens.
Mm-hmm.
It gives a different meaning to like when to play dice and when to take a time token. Like again, in that mode, it's so much more important to not set up other people, right? If you're trying to get that speed bonus, so you can take a time token just so someone else will have a harder time getting through, and hopefully by the time it comes back to you, you can clean up and get a bunch of speed cards. So that was it was an early on decision, which I'm still standing behind. I feel like it led to a game that had all these different modes that were easy to implement, and you're still playing the same game, but you can just give stuff a little bit of a different vibe. And then the main mode, the way we intend people to play, at least the first time, I think works really well too, and it comes together for a fun cooperative experience.
Mm. Now, speaking of other modes, um, I don't want to say I've noticed a lot of video game board games that does, because unfortunately, my video game board game, say collection isn't as big as I would want it to be. Once again, yet, because because obviously when I first played the game, it was at the demo at Burbank. We played through Green Hill. I absolutely love it. And then when I finally opened up my copy of the game and I was flipping through the rule book, and I saw there was time attack. I saw there was like there's like the full on competitive mode, and of course the co-op campaign mode. I'm just looking at all these different air quote modes, and I'm like, this. First of all, props to you for taking the Sonic menu system and implementing that into your board game. But how hard was it to say, okay, here we got the main mode being the campaign mode down. How do we put in time attack?
Yeah, so the way I like to do things is I always like to use the source material first
Mm-hmm.
as the main point of reference, and so I, looking at the different modes in Sonic Mania and other Sonic games, I was like, okay, how can we again
Giddy.
emulate those? Yeah, that's Leo here. Just to come up on my desk. But how can we get that stuff into the game? How can we reference, at least, if not emulate, that stuff into the game? And so, luckily, the core system itself had that versatility. There are
Mm-hmm.
different ways you can think about the pieces. Like some people might not like the pressure of the time tokens and might not want to play with that. So you can play competitive mode where you're just playing against each other, and no matter what, you guys will finish the zone, and all you care about is what the score is, right? So that's just a different way. And competition mode is something that's always been in the Sonic games. It's a different way to think about the pieces, which is what I like about doing those different modes. Again, and then with single player, because there's just a different dynamic again of like how the badniks are assigned. It's just you, so you're going to have to deal with everything, and you have no one else setting up or trying not to set up the different zone cards for you. You're just kind of working against yourself. That's where the idea for the time attack came from, and it was a matter of looking at the source material and looking at the different components we had to work with, and how can we arrange this in a way that you're still playing the same game, but it gives kind of an interesting, different spin on it.
Nice. Now, and earlier in the show, you mentioned that you were playing through the games again, which I must imagine was like the best homework assignment ever. Uh, how many times were you replaying the games until, or actually, here's a better question: what part were you, or what Sonic game was it, and what zone was it where you had a eureka moment where it's like this should be in the game and it made it into the game?
I played a lot of Mania. Mania was the main touch point, just because I had so much of what the classic series is all wrapped up into one game. But it's funny, actually, the Sega buddy I mentioned did fly out to California for a visit during that time, and so we ran through Sonic 3 and Knuckles on Sonic Origins, and Amy had just come out in Sonic Origins Plus. Like that announcement was crazy. In that I was like, okay, I got to design Amy. I'm sure I can figure something out, but it's tough because there's not a lot of source material to work with. And then they're like, actually, here's a trailer for Sonic Roll or Sonic Origins Plus with Amy in it. And like I was literally just working. I refreshed my YouTube to put on music, and I saw that. I'm like, wait, huh? And so that announcement just was great. So I got to play through that during it too. I don't know if there was ever like a eureka moment playing the games. Most of the games is research, and it just like I was like, oh, that could be this, and that's a cool idea for that. There was some interesting YouTube videos I'd watch because I watched stuff on just people who were talking about the design philosophy of Sonic and what made a Sonic game and whatnot. And there was somebody's video, Alex Yard. He does a lot of videos actually for Sonic music. Funny enough, they're really interesting. I don't know anything about music, but I'll watch them because I'm just like, hey, the Sonic soundtracks are incredible. I mean, like we actually listened to the Sonic Mania soundtrack pretty much exclusively for like months on end whenever we were driving to or from work.
I will say that when I was playing with my D&D group, I did have the Sonic Symphony album playing while we were while we were playing. And once we got through the whole album, and then I went to YouTube. I just put up Sonic music, and I think we listened to like a Studiopolis like 3 or 4 times.
That's a great
one.
And
then it got stuck in the head of one of my friends. And then later I'm at work, I'm doing my thing, and I get a message from him on Discord. He's like, "What have you done to me?" And he's listening to Studiopolis again.
That is the same that happened to my partner and our roommate. They were both like, they were sitting around, they were they were like folding clothes, and suddenly they're like, what was that one song that goes like do 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 do? And then our roommate's like, oh yeah, it goes like do 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 do, and I'm like, what are you two talking about? And they kept doing that over and over again, and I'm like, you're talking about this one, Flying Battery? It's like, no, not that one. And eventually, it was Hydro City Act 2, which is probably one of my favorite songs, but that thing at the end right before it loops, they were referencing that. It was just so funny because they had never listened to Sonic music before. They had no reference for what song they were talking about. They didn't really play Sonic, so they didn't know the zone names. They're just like, yeah, that one song I had in my head right now. But yeah. So his video, he has one that talks about playing Sonic for speed, which I thought was really interesting. I never thought about it before. I'd played the game so many times over and over again where I was like, I always get the Chaos Emeralds, I always beat it, but I never really looked at my score or cared about my score. I was just playing through the game, and he just kind of made his points about how it gives the game to get different context to try to know the tracks, to how to try to get through it perfectly. How the context of a spring trap changes so much in when you're trying to care about your speed score, because it's like done with these big thresholds where a spring trap normally is you hit it and you bounce back and you're like, oh, and you jump over it, right? But if you hit it in the context of playing for speed, you have done a ton of damage to your speed score. And I thought that was a really interesting way to look at the game, which kind of helped me come up with the 3 different style of getting points, right? Like you have your speed score, you have your rings, and you have the badniks. And I thought that was like a cool dynamic of how to look at the game. I think it would give players something to like latch onto and to understand in a way that, because Sonic is such a fast-paced video game, I think people don't think about it like inherently as much until you start playing it over and over again, and then you might notice that. But in this, you need something more to grab onto right away because it doesn't have the video game to facilitate a lot of the things.
Right. Now, you also mentioned how when you got the license from Sega said, make us a game on the classic Sonic. Like when they say classic Sonic, they obviously mean the Genesis games. But was there any push? I don't want to say any pushback. That sounds too mean. When Sega said classic, were they like very diehard and saying only use up to this game, or were you able to add in Mania? Because obviously Mania is a quote unquote newer game, but at the same time, it's a newer game, but in the old Sonic style.
So classic versus modern is more of like different universes is the way Sega considers it. So Sonic Superstars is actually a classic. even though it's the
Okay.
most recent Sonic game to come out. So it's the characters you have available, the stylistic look of Sonic, and it's like the best example is oh God, what's it called? Sonic Generations.
Right.
It's that is classic Sonic and modern Sonic in the same game, which normally doesn't happen. But that's where you can clearly see the delineation. Actually, I'm sorry. One second, my door is open.
Oh no. Make a note.
Sorry about that.
It's all right.
If you don't close it just right, the cat can get it open, and I guess he did that, but
Ah.
he's right there, so he's just chilling, causing mischief as he is wont to do.
Yeah,
Um,
I have a cat myself, and she can be a gremlin sometimes.
we love him for it, but yeah,
Yeah.
he's been known. Yeah, so that is the like I said, the biggest thing of when working with them is you have to be cognizant of what you are allowed to use, what assets they want you to reference. So classic Sonic is it's like Sonic 1, 2, 3, CD, Sonic and Knuckles. Interestingly, the chaotics I suppose are considered modern and not classic, which I thought was interesting. Um,
But they came out on the 32X though.
yeah, which yeah, so it wasn't a huge deal because we didn't have a lot of plans to use stuff from Knuckles Chaotix or anything, but that was just an interesting thing I found out working on this. But yeah, so Sonic Mania was completely good. Anything for Sonic Mania we could use, any characters from Sonic Mania. So that hard-boiled heavies are classic Sonic villains. Um, and then yeah, as I mentioned, Superstars is now the latest classic game.
Okay. It does. It kind of makes sense now because obviously, I would say 2D games would be more classic. I'm a sucker for classic, not just because I grew up on the games, but when the trailer for Mania came out, I was so hyped. You can't see it. Used to be here, where my recording space was a little bit different. It was out in my loft, but I have like a little quote unquote Sonic slash Mega Man, I guess you would call it a shrine, and I bought the collector's edition for Sonic Mania when it first came out, and I got it for the PS4, and it had the statue, it has the cartridge, and everything. And then it was like, hey, here's a physical one with the art book, and I'm like, guess I'm buying that for my Switch, which I did.
Yeah. I mean, yeah. As soon as I saw that, I'm like, okay, I need this immediately. I can't wait. I was calling my buddy. I've been talking about like I remember when you get to the boss of Chemical Plant and you drop in a Mean Bean Machine. And I'm like, oh my
Oh,
god, this is so cool. I kept
I,
sending him shots of what I was doing.
it was the Old West zone. I forget the name of the zone off the top of my head, but you know which one I'm talking about, right?
Mirage Saloon, yeah.
Mirage Saloon. Thank you. But before they updated it, and I saw the posters for Bark the Polar Bear, Knack the Weasel, and Bean the Duck, I was like, that is a cut. And I knew those characters not from the games, but from the old Archie comic books.
Yeah, it's so chock full of just like all these cool references and whatnot. It's such a love letter to the old series with all these new ideas too, which is that was I mean basically that was the goal when we started this project. Like a product like Sonic Mania, you could tell was made for the fans, but not in a way that sometimes people are afraid to innovate or like change anything and evolve. And Sonic
Mm-hmm.
Mania is such a good example of just like learning the lessons over the years of how to make an incredible game and a fun game, but also putting so much love and passion into the source material that you're trying to reference to just create such an amazing game. Sonic Mania is just a really incredible game that I still love playing through. I'll still run through it.
Oh yeah, Mania is definitely one of those games I'd go back to. I'm trying to play through Origins in like quote unquote story mode, where you play through all the games. I just got through Sonic One, and that was actually the first time I ever beat Sonic One proper. Because I love Sonic the Hedgehog One, but Sonic Two, Sonic Three, and Sonic CD. Sonic CD is my favorite Sonic game, my favorite video game of all time. But I just like Sonic Two a lot more. Sonic, don't get me wrong, I love the original Sonic the Hedgehog, but man, do I hate Marble Zone. I just
Yeah, there's always one of those zones that's just a nightmare where you're like, when as soon as you fire up Green Hill or Emerald Hill or something, you're like, all right, yeah, let's play some Sonic, and then you get to that one zone, you're like, oh yeah, this one's here. I gotta deal with this now.
it's Wacky Workbench for me in Sonic CD because I love Sonic CD, but man, do I hate Wacky Workbench.
Yeah, I think it's got to be Sandopolis for me for Sonic and
Uh,
Knuckles. That's the one zone that
oh,
I'm like, I wish I could just move past this. Especially Act Two is just kind of a pain. But other than that, I like pretty much every other zone in that game.
quick side tangent. Since we're talking about our least favorite Sonic levels, Carnival Night, Sonic 3. I have so much hate for that level.
Is it
Like,
the Doom the Tone
yes,
of Doom? Yeah,
yes, it is the Doom Barrel. Do you know how long it took me to finally get through that and realize that to properly get through that, you had to hit up and down on the D pad?
yeah.
20
It's
years. 20 years.
it's funny because I never realized how infamous that was. Because again, like, I don't know if my buddy just knew how to do it when I was a kid, and he's like, "Oh yeah, just hit up and down." Like I don't remember figuring that out because it was so long ago. So like to me, it's just always like when I get to that part, I already know what to do. So then when I looked online and I hear people complain about it, it's so funny when I see sometimes my fiance play games and like there's stuff that I've been playing since I'm a child. So it's so deeply ingrained in me to do things that are just like second nature that I don't even think about what it looks like to a newcomer,
Mhm.
which is like an important thing to do in game design now. A lot of older games can be a little rougher with that. And so it's something to be cognizant of when you're designing games. Like, what does this look like to someone who hasn't been playing for the last 25 years, right? Like the Barrel Doom is, when you think about it, extremely unintuitive. Like, there's nothing else in
I
the game that works like that. There's no indication that that's what you're supposed to do. And so if you didn't have a friend in the playground tell you or just happen to do the right thing, then yeah, I don't know how you're supposed to figure that out. There's some things that when I go back and I play old video games, I'm like, how the hell did
yeah.
7-year-old me figure this out?
It's like, how did you figure it? Okay, so when my brother, because I had Sonic 3 and Knuckles, it was the Sonic and Knuckles collection. It was Sonic 3 and Knuckles and Sonic Knuckles all in one thing for the PC. I did not own a Sega Genesis proper, not even a proper, because I have the mini consoles that Sega released like a few 5 years ago and such. I never owned Sonic and Knuckles like the cartridge or Sonic 3 the cartridge, any of that. And apparently, in the instruction manual for the for the Genesis game, like the actual cartridge, it says to get through this barrel, you have to push up and down. Now,
Oh, I
I
didn't know
was one of those
that.
kids who liked looking through instruction manuals. Now, granted, I was a first grader. I could read. My reading level wasn't the best. I would just look at the pretty pictures. But as much as I can remember, from the CD, from the PC ports of Sonic 3 and Knuckles, nowhere in that instruction manual, as far as I can remember now, it's been over 20 years. Like I said, I may have glanced over it, I may have not heard, I may have not seen it. Nowhere does it say how to get past the barrel. And when my brother and I would play it, because I was playing Sonic, he would play as Tails, we only got through that barrel once, only once, and we would play through the entire game. We would get, oh my goodness, we would get through Angel Island, we would get through Hydro City, we get through all the, but second we got to Carnival Night, and I would have to hear that horrific carnival music in my head. The popping of the balloons is burned into my skull, and as much as I love Sonic 3 Knuckles, I hate so I feel like Robotnik from The Adventures of Sonic the Hedgehog, where he tattooed hate on his teeth, as just like that one zone. That is the one zone that does not get a pass. Like, I don't like Wacky Workbench, but I will give it a pass. I do not like Metallic Madness Act 2 very specifically, but I will give that a pass. I will not give Carnival Night a pass. No, I will die on this hill.
Yeah, I mean it's funny too, yeah, because it seems like you're supposed to like jump on it and make it go higher or lower. Yeah, it is funny that they're. I'm sure like a lot of playtesters must have been gotten confused. Like, okay, well we'll just note it in the rule book and that'll be fine. It's funny like older games too, like the way they would throw stuff in the rule book where not thinking about like what if somebody loses the rule book or what if what if in 10 years they don't have the rule book anymore, like the game is unplayable now. There's a game called Star Tropics that it was on the NES, and it's funny. My Sega buddy, he also had an NES. I never had an NES, but Super Nintendo was our first system. But he had that
Nice.
game, and we had a hell of a time getting through that because there was a few things. There was in the rule book at some point you're supposed to get it wet, to find a code inside to put into the game, and the only way to get through is to put this code in from the rule book. And
What?
like and so we told his mom like, hey, we have to get this rule book wet. And she's like, what are you talking about? No, you don't. You're gonna ruin it. Don't do that. And we're like, no, we're serious. And then at one point, there's a piano, and you have to know like piano scales. And I'm a kid. I don't know piano scales. I don't know what to do. We were stuck there forever, like basically until the internet came out.
What?
Yeah, it's a wild little game.
Yeah, because Star Tropics, I want to say that's even on the NES Classic. Because as far as I can
It
remember,
might be.
Star Tropics, yeah, it's one of those games that a lot of NES fans. I mean, I'm an NES fan myself, obviously, but Star Tropics is just one of those things I've never really heard about. And now and I didn't know that is some Metal Gear Solid moving your controller from controller port 1 to 2 stuff right there.
It's actually really funny in the Wii port of it, because it got moved to the Wii Virtual Console. If you have to go into like the Wii's menu to go to the instruction booklet in the Wii menu to like, and then there's like a button you can hit to do an animation where it'll like fake pour water on the rulebook to reveal the code in it, because that's the only way to get past that part is to get that code. So you have to go to the rulebook. Okay,
that's actually kind of cool. I won't lie, that bit that's kind of cool, but I agree with your mom or was it your mom or your friend's mom? My apologies.
My friend's mom.
Yeah.
She's like,
I definitely agree with your friend's mom, because if I had to go up to my mom and tell her I have to get a certain thing wet, she would say the exact same thing. And even I was like, how?
Yeah, it comes from a time of like a kind of like toyish design right there. Like what's like a cool way to do this that feels like a toy? Because at the time, video games and toys were essentially the same thing. Like they weren't really respected as their own medium yet. So it is funny to see that kind of that stuff, that holdover stuff of people trying stuff, which is important, like trying stuff and secret things or hidden stuff or revealing things that you wouldn't think to do. Sometimes the original implementation is kind of a miss, but there are ideas to take there.
Mm-hmm. But still, getting your
yeah, that one was a little wacky.
No, the more I think about it, because I do remember a lot of old like toy commercials, McDonald's commercials, where it's like, oh yeah, it changes color, and like they would dunk their like a Hot Wheel in the water, and it would go from blue to green or something, and it was just like, oh, this is so cool, and it's like, oh, that's so rad. And the '90s were a time, man.
They were a time. They were a heck of a time.
Yeah. So going back to this beauty, I'm looking on the back of the box, and one of the things I also love about it was that you have all the main Genesis games, including Mania, strung out here on the box. There's so much content in these 6 games. I don't know why I had to count them out there right now. There's so much content, and you can only put so much into this game. How hard was it to pick the zones? Because you have 4 zones in here. You have Green Hill, Chemical Plant, Lava Reef, and Stardust Speedway. Thank you for giving Stardust Speedway some love. That's one of my favorite zones, and my favorite in Sonic CD. Like I said, Sonic CD, my favorite Sonic game / video game of all time. But how hard was it to pick the zones to put into the final product of the game?
There was a little bit of debate about what zones. I don't actually. I don't think it was that hard. What was nice is that it all like, because everything has to tie together, and because of the bosses that were available, I think in my own mind at least, it was easy to reconcile. Like, these should be the zones, right? Like Green Hill, you got to have, obviously.
Yeah.
Like, and I wanted each game to get a little bit of representation. So I think Stardust Speedway is one of the most iconic zones from CD, and Metal Sonic, you have to have Metal Sonic, right? Like, there's no way, and that's his zone. So that was another easy choice. And then I fought hard for Lava Reef because it to me, it's one of the most iconic zones. It's for a game that has no like dialogue or anything like that. The ramp up for me in Lava Reef is so like palpable. Like when the music kicks in, when you fall into it, like the ending little chase before the boss in Act 2, like the switch, the transition from Act 1 to Act 2, like going and finding the Hidden Palace zone, like all that stuff is so iconic to me, so memorable. I mean, like there's other memorable zones in 3. Obviously, Hydra City is an incredible zone. Sky Sanctuary is an important and incredibly relevant zone. But like to me, Lava Reef, just it all comes together. And then you actually fight Heavy King there as Knuckles in Sonic Mania. So
Hmm.
that went from, I really want this into it kind of being a no-brainer for being another zone because it has a relevant boss fight. And then the final zone, there was, I think a lot of different things it could be, but most people in the office were familiar with Sonic 2,
Hmm.
and they were like, "There's no way you can't put Chemical Plant in this game." And I mean, it's a great zone to fight Robotnik in. I know it's Zone 2 in Sonic 2, but it is a factory. Pretty like pretty relevant to Eggman.
Hmm.
And so that was a pretty easy choice, I think, for the final zone to finally fight him. And then you get representation from Sonic 1, 2, 3, and CD.
I mean, I would say I'd also argue that the blue sphere would be the representative because one of the things I really loved when I was playing and first setting up the game when I first opened it up, I was playing with my fiance and my roommate, and even later on with my D&D group, or also with you guys at the play event in Burbank, was essentially being the Leo DiCaprio meme, where I'm like, whoa, like that's like I understood that reference from, to quote Captain America from the Avengers, of where each thing or where each game was represented. Um, Obviously, like blue sphere is like, okay, this is a blue sphere from Sonic 3. Green Hill, we know Green Hill. And then it's like, oh, hey, this is Lava Reef from Mania. You got Stardust Speedway. And I was like, we got a zone in from Sonic CD. Oh my gosh. Because I feel like for years, Sonic CD kind of got, put to the side. It wasn't included in a lot of the collections. And then, because it was a CD game, you needed the Sega CD to play the game, obviously. So it was in that weird limbo of, is it really a Genesis game or is it not a Genesis game? It technically is, but it isn't. That whole spiel.
Yeah, it was important to us and to me especially that there is all that stuff for everyone who grew up in these games, right? Like there's stuff that you can see and you can remember the things that you loved from those games. And if you ask Sonic fans what their favorite game is, you will get a plethora of answers. You will hear Sonic 1, Sonic 2, Sonic 3, Sonic Knuckles, Sonic CD, Sonic Mania. Obviously, all the modern ones. You will hear a different answer. So I wanted to make sure that people got something from the game that was their favorite, that they remember growing up on the most. And putting one of the most fun things was to put all those little goodies in, to figure out like, how can I reference this, how can I squeeze this in there without it being intrusive in the gameplay, how can I put all the extra goodies for Sonic fans, because at the end of the day, that was one of the biggest goals for me, was to make this game for Sonic fans, for people who grew up loving Sonic and that they could enjoy it. Like, I want it to be a fun board game, obviously, as well. I hope that even if you're not a Sonic fan, you can find the fun in this game. But I think if you are a Sonic fan, there's just so much stuff in there that we tried to put in there for you to enjoy that it's nice to hear when people appreciate that.
Yeah. So when you say there were some debates, what was the final zone, if you can say? Because I do have a question a little bit later down the line. But what were some zones that were put? Because we mentioned like Sky Sanctuary, we mentioned a few others. What were zones that were up for grab, like were this close to making it into the final version, but were cut?
Some of the zones we were talking about, like Casino Zone, Spring Yard Zone, Sky Sanctuary Zone, Hydra City Zone, were all zones that
Please.
were mentioned, that we debated the merits of. But at the end of the day, we felt like the zones we had were the ones that would be the best representations of everything, and again would make sense with like the boss fight. Like it was tough because the classic series, most of the time you're fighting Eggman, right? Like that's the
Mm-hmm.
boss you fight 90% of the time, and we didn't want each level to just be fighting Eggman over and over again. We wanted to represent like all sorts of different characters and whatnot. So we had to be kind of clever about like who would be a boss, like how could we associate with them with the zone, like what's the tie in there, and so that helped us make those final decisions. It would have been nice to be able to use every zone. Obviously, they're all so cool. They're all iconic in their own ways. They all have like interesting, little gimmicks or designs that you could put in and make interesting little the routes. Like that was one of the fun parts of making just the zone cards, was thinking
Mm-hmm.
about the level, thinking about iconic parts of the level, like the Barrel of Doom or something. There's just always a part of a level where you're like, oh, it's that part. There's like a little trick here, or there's a ring here if you do this or something. And so, how can we represent that through the gameplay that we were doing? It was always fun. I'm pretty happy. I mean, obviously, I'm happy with it because I got to make the final say. But
Yeah.
I'm happy with the zone that we landed on. But if we ever did stuff in the future, there are other zones that we talked about that we would love to include.
Yeah, because that would beg the question. And also, a supervisor from my job who also was at the Burbank event, he actually, when I told him that I was going to be talking with you today, he actually asked me, he's like, "Can you ask if like any expansions are coming?" Because obviously, with all six of those games, and there's only four zones in it. Don't get me wrong, four zones is still great, and especially with campaign mode, that takes a good long while to get through. But there's just other zones. I don't want to say that there's other zones, but is there plans for possible zone expansions for Sonic Mania for Sonic Roll? Maybe going into bringing in stuff from Sega Saturn, or is that all like hush hush lock and key?
So I can't say too much about it, but there has been a really positive response to Sonic Roll,
Mm-hmm.
and so we are looking into what we can do to bring people more content because there's a want for more content. Like we've seen people out there making their own custom zones and whatnot. Like that's how much people are
Oh,
enjoying this game, which for me is an incredible thing to see. It's wild to see someone enjoying something that much and they want something more that much that they're now going off and making more content for themselves because like as a game designer, that's why I do this. I want to make something that people can enjoy and have fun, and to know people are having that much fun is really the best feeling in the world.
nice. Now, obviously, this is I want to talk to you. You guys do your own thing, and I don't work for Kess. I have no. The only person I know from Kess is obviously you. But if you do make expansions, please put in Studiopolis. I I love that zone, and it just gives me an excuse to put on the Studiopolis song to music because goodness, and like Studiopolis and Flying Battery, I love those zones.
Flying
Even
Battery,
though,
both the tracks in those zones are wonderful. That was one of my favorite parts of playing through Mania is just seeing the zones that made it back in. And so,
Mhm.
like going to when Flying Battery, when you go into there, I'm like, oh yes, this is one of my favorite zones. Dropping into Hydro City, I was so excited. I was worried that zone wasn't going to make the cut, and yeah, getting back into that made me so genuinely happy. Like it was such a cool part of playing through Mania the first time.
Yeah, well, for me, playing Idle as much as a part I love of Mania was being able to get through Flying Battery. Because when I was a kid and I would play through Sonic and Knuckles, I get to Flying Battery. I mean, the music for Flying Battery is like, oh yeah, this is great.
Oh yeah.
But man, I don't know what was wrong with first, second grader me. I could not get through Flying Battery Zone Act Two to save my life.
There are a lot of insta deaths in Flying
Yeah.
Battery that are kind of mean and not like a lot of you don't have to worry about falling off into the sky in a lot of the zones
Mhm.
that Flying Battery will also crush you in certain spots. So it is a tough
Yeah.
zone.
But hey, at least they fit. I don't want to say they fixed it in Sonic Mania, but at least they made it better in Sonic Mania. Even though that spider boss just,
Yeah, that one's kind of a pain.
yeah, that's a bummer. So we have the Genesis games. Was there anyone in the office who mentioned the Game Gear games, or did Sega say only the main console, including CD Mania, no Game Gear?
So the Game Gear games I am much less familiar with. My buddy did have a Game Gear, but I can't remember playing any of the Sonic games for it. So we wanted to keep the scope, for this first one because it was already, there was a time constraint. There was a lot of content to get out, and we wanted to make a cohesive thing. So we kept the scope kind of on the Genesis ones.
Mm-hmm.
No one, I don't think anyone in the office is familiar with the Game Gear games aside from me, but. Like it was funny when we were talking to Tracy, who did the cover illustration for this. He is familiar with the Game Gear games, and he was talking about different color schemes we could do and whatnot. And he had suggested the Game Gear as one of them. Um, so it is something that people were talking about a little bit. In the future, it is something we could possibly look into because there are other
Mm-hmm.
characters there that might be fun to explore. But at the time, there wasn't enough time for me to play through every Sonic game,
Yeah,
unfortunately.
yeah, yeah. And there's a lot of Game Gear games. That's it's funny
I
because
think
I look at because I had a Game Gear when I was younger. I only had Sonic 2 on it, and there's a part of that Sonic 2 game that I could not get past. It was just too hard. I don't know why.
yeah, not enough time, not enough batteries in the office for this time.
No. That's the other thing. Oh my goodness. Yeah, because I loved my Game Gear, but at the same time, just looking back on now, it's just like yikes. How? Just how?
Yeah, that was the one thing I remember when my buddy busted that out. I'm like, holy gosh, that's a lot of batteries.
Yes, it did. Yep. Even when I first brought it home and I took it and I looked at the back of it, I was like, oh. Even my parents were like, oh no. And then they saw how quickly, because we had Game Boy Pockets when I was a kid. Two AAA's, that sucker would last for 16 plus hours. Maybe three was six double A's.
Yeah, it was brutal.
It was hey, 90s were a time, man. Um, so going to Sonic Roll still. Now, no spoilers because I want it to be completely transparent. I have obviously I played the game a few times, but we've only played through Green Hill Zone because I tested with you guys at Burbank, and I played with my fiance and my roommate, and then we started the campaign with my D&D group. We have everything. We got one of the Chaos Emeralds, so we like wrote it down because we knew because we're gonna pick it back up and get through the campaign. One of the things I really like about Sonic Roll is that there's a section in the rule book that says, do not open this until you meet the specific criteria.
Yeah, that was.
And
Sorry, go ahead.
no, I was going to ask why.
So that was an idea that actually came from Alex, our CEO. He was talking about other games he'd seen that do something like that, and it, thinking about it once he had mentioned, just like he kind of threw it there as an idea, and thinking about that era of gaming, right? Thinking about that era of secrets and finding things and whatnot. It's such a part of that I think a lot of games, like, games still do that, but because of the internet, because of the way the world functions, it's harder to have moments like that,
Right.
and content like that. Now everybody went, like, a lot of people just play stuff to just get to the end or to unlock everything so they can actually start playing the game. And that feeling of like wonder of just not knowing something is going to be there and then unlocking it was something we wanted to capture in this, because again, we're trying to capture the vibe, the essence of those 90s games in the 90s. Right. And so that idea, like thinking about it, is like that's something that really made sense. And so the content we did put down there, I think people are really going to enjoy it. It feels authentic, and extremely cool, in my own opinion, for what you would expect, to
Yeah.
unlock in a game like that.
Yeah. Although I do have a minor confession to make. I think I spoiled myself what happened because okay, I have the game. I'm taking the contents out, and the plastic bit that holds a bunch of the stuff. I look down and I see that there's a little discoloration over by a certain bit of the plastic. I'm like, huh, what's that? I then, do the thing. I go, oh no! I instantly. So I would say that I don't want to say I cheat. I'm saying I did not cheat. I did not just go straight to the thing. I was like, I don't want to play all it. Just open it up. It's like, oh, that's what that is. Because, like you said, I also want to play this game, like air quotes, the way it was intended, but also just like those old video games, you have to get to that stuff without a cheat code, and it's it brings you. It's like I earned this. It's sort of that, and thankfully, my friends who I'm playing through campaign mode agree. I just feel like I'm just calling it as like, oh, I glitched. I accidentally glitched and got to the stuff. So once again, I'm not spoiling what I saw. I just saw something and then my brain took like 2 seconds to be like, you shouldn't be looking at this right now. I'm like, sorry.
Yeah, it was unfortunate. Like when we're doing everything, we're getting everything tooled and whatnot. The white insert seemed like a more authentic Sonic. It seemed like it fit the vibe and the look of the game better. But it does, there is the possibility for that. I've noticed it myself, and I'm like, oh. So if I have one regret, it's that it can be a little easy to spoil yourself. I feel like some people have accidentally spoiled themselves, and I feel bad. I wish that wasn't the case, but that's a kind of a live you learn thing. Like,
Yeah.
sometimes you just don't.
I see what you did there.
You don't even know what you don't know until it's put right in your face, right? Like
Yeah.
I wouldn't have thought that could happen.
I mean, I'm looking at the design. I mean, first of all, I love props to your graphic designer for
That was Lauren.
making it look like. making it look. I mean, Tracy Yarley's art right here is absolutely stunning. When I went to the Burbank event, do you know how mad I was that I didn't win that raffle? Because I would have killed for this poster signed by Tracy.
And
And also,
Tracy was like, I just working with him was amazing. Like he was so fast, so responsive, so talented. Like it was really cool getting to work with someone who had been working with Sonic for so long, right? Like
mhm.
he, sometimes I know it seems kind of funny, but it's like like we're little guys coming in trying to make this project, and we talked to Tracy, and he's like, "Oh yeah, sure, I'd love to. Let me get you a sketch immediately." Like he knew the process. He worked with Sega before, so he was great. And yeah, the illustration came out amazing. The art is phenomenal. We always get compliments on it.
Yeah. Did Sega reach out to Tracy, or did you reach out to Tracy?
So
Who was there a
Sega
middleman, or?
Sega had a list of people to contact. They're like, okay,
Mhm.
so if you want to commission a piece of art, because we wanted a piece of art, we didn't want to just reuse like the Origins
Mhm.
key art or something. And plus, they wouldn't have let us probably anyway. So we wanted to make our own piece of art for it to make, for this new game. And they're like, well, here are the list of artists that are familiar with the process that we trust, that we work with. So if you want to reach out to them, then it'll make everything smoother as far as getting it approved. And so Tracy was on that list. We contacted him, and he was down for the project, and we were happy that he was, because we got the art that we did.
Yeah, and once again, because like I said earlier, I bought the game right before I left for Japan, and the game was obviously on sale at the event. You were there, Tracy was there, and had I had the foresight, I would have brought my copy with me. But also at the same time, I probably would have gotten stopped, and I had to try and convince the Barnes and Noble manager that no, I did not steal this thing. Because I saw people get you guys signing the book or signing the rule book, signing the cover, and I'm just sitting there just like with this huge thing of FOMO. Was like, I could have gotten every single person here to sign it. I could have gotten Tracy to sign it. Why did I forget this game back at home? And then I thought to myself, I was like, at least I didn't steal. At least I'm not being accused of stealing.
Yeah, I was the same thing when I walk into a store with something. I'm like, I hope that they know that I walked in here with this. I don't know. I get the
Yeah.
same feeling. I think most of the time they just assume that people didn't. But
Yeah, I didn't think about it until I was actually there, and then I saw, people get, the signing, you guys signing the games. I'm just like, well, shoot, I could have gotten mine. And the thought of me buying a new copy was there, but then I knew my fiance was gonna let me have it. She's like, "Why did you do this?" um,
yeah, it
so
is always it's always really cool what we're doing that. That's another one of my favorite parts, like going to conventions and whatnot. I always love when people are like, they think something is so cool that I worked on that they want my signature. Because again, I mean, who am I, right? But it's always a nice thing to be asked that. And like, if you see us, anywhere else, because Kess is looking to do more events in Burbank and around, like, you can always bring whatever games, and I'll always be happy to sign something like that. I know we're trying to start like working with local game stores for some of our
mhm.
launches. Like Geeky Tees in Burbank is an awesome store, and we've gone there to do stuff before, so we'll be around here and there. Um, and I'll make sure to tell anybody that, hey, no, that guy, he came here with that game.
Don't call the cops.
Yeah, yeah.
It's like he's cool. He's cool. We know him. So we talked about Sonic Roll at length, but you also have another game that's coming out very soon. Actually, you said it's releasing at Gamescom next week, correct?
PAX West.
PAX West. Sorry, well, Gamescom's going on now. My gosh, I don't know. It's
I
because
know, it's crazy.
my brain. It's so many things going on, and my brain goes like, anyways, PAX West. It's coming out of PAX West, and obviously, when I first saw it, I'm like that meme of the guy slamming his fist and handing the credit card because I'm just that guy. And also, perfect timing because a certain movie is coming out later this year, and another video game is coming out later this year, and
Yeah,
that game and. Yeah, and please correct me if I'm wrong. I sure wrote down. My apologies. Is Sonic Adventure Speed Battle?
so it is just Sonic Speed Battle.
Sonic Speed Battle. No, okay.
Yes, yeah,
Based off
Sonic
Sonic
Speed
Adventure
Battle.
2. Yeah,
Correct.
based off Sonic Adventure 2, Sonic Speed Battle. How much can we talk about this? Because obviously, I want to know a little bit about it, and you designed this game as well. So how long? So did when after you were done with Sonic Roll, and after the success of Sonic Roll, did Kess and Sega come to you and say, "Hey, bud, can you do it again? Or did you go to them?
So we had the license for games, and so we just talked to them that we had another game idea. We wanted to
Oh,
make,
okay.
so my boss came to me. He's like, we want to make a game that is kind of a parallel to Sonic Roll in that it'll be for younger skewing audience. It'll be a simpler, like, less dense experience. The Sonic Roll is very nostalgia heavy, and strategy. As strategic as dice rolls can be, some people will argue, but it's a more strategy focused game, a bigger box game, bigger setup and whatnot. We wanted a counterpoint to that to be a cheaper, smaller, faster game,
Okay.
and so they're like, "Can you do this?" I'm like, that's what I do. And so we started working on that early this year, beginning or the end of last year. And yeah, again, it's we talk to Sega once we have our ideas. They're like, that sounds good. Just keep us in the loop and make sure that everything is in compliance with what the Sonic team and they would expect. And that's how that got started. And yeah, we finished it, and it is now launching next week. So I'm really excited about that. I can't wait to start seeing people play that, because again, watching people get to play the stuff I worked on is always my favorite part. Um, it's a three games in one. That was
Oh,
the big thing of this. There's one deck that you play with, and you can play three different games. And so the all that stuff is actually out on our website now, on our YouTube channel. You can see the
mhm.
rules for the game, but it's based off of the three game modes in Sonic Adventure 2. It's based off of action race, shooting battle, and treasure hunt.
Nice.
There's a bunch of different characters. There's way more characters that were than just Sonic Adventure 2 characters. Obviously, we have the people you'd expect for Sonic Adventure 2, but there's also a lot more characters. Like, there've been some social media reveals this week, so there's like Cream and Cheese are in it.
Oh, what they are?
Oh yeah, Cream
Oh,
and Cheese. Omega is in it. There's a lot of other characters that are going to be available to play in the three different modes. Like, each character is associated with a different mode. So, like Cream, you can play in the shooting battle.
mhm.
Silver is in it. Silver, you can play in the action race. Metal Sonic is in it. You can play him in the action race.
For audio listeners, I just pumped on my hands because Metal Sonic's my favorite villain. I mean, Sonic's my favorite character, obviously. Metal, I don't know why, I just like robots.
I knew we had to get Metal Sonic in there for the Metal Sonic fans, so he's in there.
blame blame Sonic CD. Just blame Sonic CD, because the second I got to Stardust and I got to race against a robot version of me as Sonic, I thought it was the coolest thing ever.
He is a very cool villain. Like, a lot of heroes have like their dark counterpart, whatever. But no one really does it as good as Metal Sonic. There's something about Metal Sonic that's just really inherently cool, and it's cool that we're seeing him more, because I feel
Oh yeah.
like he's like, iconic. Everyone knows who he is, but he's like, he was in Sonic CD, and then he was kind of like missing for a while. There are like the other robot Sonics that they're fine, but they're no Metal Sonic.
Oh, so that's. Oh, I do apologize. I was listening to what you were saying. So, um, fun fact: one of the people who just announced that who's going to be in Sonic Speed Battle is actually a coworker, someone I work with at Fusion Game Magazine, Retro Faith, and she just announced. Actually, yesterday she announced that
That's Theo, right?
SBO.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, because she mentioned that Kess Entertainment was announcing who was going to be in the Sonic games, and I'm just looking. I was like, and I when I saw her initial tweet that she was going to announce that, hey, I'm going to say who's going to be in this card game, I was like, I'm talking to the guy tomorrow. What? What? How do you know Faith? Because she was a former guest here on Pod Menu, and also I'm willing to bet it was thanks to her that she got me my writing gig over at Fusion Gaming Magazine. So shout out to Retro Faith. How's it going?
Yeah. Our social media manager and Alex and they both wanted to run a campaign where they were working with people. So our social media manager, she reached out. She got people the cards. They've been doing reveals all week, which has been cool, getting people all hyped up for the release at the end of the week. And the Sonic fans, everyone loves to see the characters that they're a fan of that sometimes don't get all of the representation they would like. So the Chaotix are all in it. So people have been excited about that all week. Uh, uh, Marine is in it, who hasn't been seen in a little while, and so people
Wait,
have been excited about
Marine?
her.
Like Maria?
She's no. Now Marina Borotnik is not in the game, unfortunately, but Marine the
Oh, yeah.
raccoon.
Oh, Sonic Rush. No, no, yeah, yeah. Sonic Rush. Blaze's friend. I know her now. I remember. Sorry, it took a minute. It took a
Blaze.
minute.
Blaze
Yep,
is also in the game.
Blaze is okay. Even awesome. I'm sorry because when you said Marine, I was like, "There's only one character I know of." It's probably because I went to the Sonic Symphony a few weeks ago in San Diego, and when they played All of Me, you saw Maria meet her fate, and I'm just like, he's like Marine. Who the heck is Marine? I know there's a Maria, and it's like, oh wait, Marine the raccoon, Sonic Rush.
Yeah, we chalked as many cool characters as we could into there for the different modes. So, like I said, I'm super excited about it. It is a nice light game. Like I said, it's one deck of cards, but the
Mm-hmm.
action race you get to play one way. The shooting, all three games play very differently. The action race is like you are trying to all put a card down and not match someone else's number, and if you do, you get a point. If you do match, then you have to battle that person, and then the winner of
Ooh,
that battle will get a point for everybody in the battle at the start.
okay.
The shooting battle is a little bit like war, where you're putting down you choose someone to duel. Both players put down a card. You reveal it. The higher number wins, and then depending on what card you did damage with, you get to do a special effect. And then the
Mm-hmm.
treasure hunt is you're racing to find two treasure or master emerald shards, of course. And so you're playing like a card into your radar each turn, which will do something, and then you're trying to match the sequence of numbers on the emerald. And so they're all quick. They're all like 10 to 15 minute little mini games that you can play, but they're all referencing Sonic Adventure 2, like the game modes. I played a ton of Sonic Adventure 2 battle mode growing up when that came up to the GameCube. So I distinctly remember all of the characters and like their feels. Like I tried to I tried to make sure Amy felt like playing against Amy in Sonic Adventure 2. As I don't know if anybody's played the battle mode in that, but she is completely brutal. She'll just keep freezing you over and over again, and there's
Oh
not much
wow.
you can do.
I never owned a GameCube growing up, sadly. So, but I did have a Sega Dreamcast, and that's where I first played Sonic Adventure 2. It was my Christmas present. Unfortunately, I got it like the year after Sega discontinued the system. Rest in peace.
Yeah.
Rest in peace, Dreamcast. And Sonic Adventure 2 was easily the game I played the most. And when I saw that Sonic Adventure 2 Battle was coming to the GameCube, of course, I went to my parents, begged for a GameCube, and they literally said, "You have Sonic at home. It's on your Dreamcast that you begged for. We're not getting you a GameCube."
Yeah, it's funny. My buddy who had the Dreamcast, like all of the games that he got me hooked on, like I played Fantasy Star Online over at his house a ton, and when that came to GameCube, I was so excited. Both Sonic Adventures, like immediately I picked them up as soon as I could. I was so excited to play all that stuff. I was the only person I've ever met in person. I mean, obviously other people have this, but I was the only person I've ever met to have a GameCube modem. I had both. I had the dial-up one because I played PSO originally on dial-up, so no one else in the house could make a phone call if I was trying to play PSO. And then I got the broadband one when that finally came out. Um, so all those Sega games once they migrated over to GameCube, I couldn't wait to pick them up and play it. And Sonic Adventure 2, I spent an entire summer basically just getting all the A ranks to unlock that Green Hill or Emerald Hill. I forget which one it is, but there's like a
I'm pretty sure it's
secret.
Green Hill.
Yeah, there's a secret Green Hill zone at the end if you get all of the A ranks.
Now, for Sonic Speed Battle, is there any like little secrets that if you do a certain thing you can unlock, like if there's a Sonic roll, or is it just here's the cards, go have fun?
Yeah, that one's a lot more just here's the card, just go have fun. It's completely competitive. It's just little mini
Okay.
games you can play against each other. And like I said, it's meant to be just a lighter activity. It's good to like start or end a night, or play with younger children, or play against each other. I still like to bust it out. It's actually a game that, given like if we're bored for a little bit at the office or something, and we're like we want to play a game, I'm like you want to throw down a treasure hunt? Like want to. There's some rivalries that'll pop up at the office over certain things. Who's the greatest treasure hunter of all? But it's a much lighter experience. It's the price point will reflect that as well. But it's something that I'm extremely excited to come out. Like it was really exciting when Sonic World came out, and it's cool to sit through and see that. But it'll be nice to see a game too that like a lot of times the young children will come up with their parents, and their parents will say, can they play this? And I'm like, they could play this. If you're going to sit through and play with them, then you can get through it. A lot of it is rolling and matching numbers, but there is some words you have to comprehend, some bigger ideas, and it can be difficult for youngsters to play. And there are a lot of young kid Sonic fans, so this game is more inclusive, and that's why I'm excited for that one to come out.
I mean, I'm just always excited for more Sonic stuff, to be perfectly honest. I mean, I love Sonic Roll. I love what you guys have done with Sonic Roll, and that's not, and I mean that sincerely. It's not just me, because I want to talk to you about how the game was created and all this other stuff. But the fact that you're making more Sonic games, like Sonic Speed Battle, it just makes me happy because as a Sonic fan, don't get me wrong, we're still getting good games. But I have been dying and waiting for Sonic Mania 2 to happen.
I know,
Please,
me too.
Sega.
Me too. I would love a Sonic Mania 2. It is just one of the best games that's come out in a long time, let alone one of the best Sonic games. So I'm sitting there right with you, holding my breath, waiting for it.
I mean, I'm excited for Generations Cross Shadow. I'm really looking forward to that. I'm still trying to wrestle if I want to buy the $250 collector's edition because that Dreamcast statue looks so good. And
I've heard a few people in my life going through the same struggle right now.
I mean, I can only imagine there are people in the office who are looking at this they're just rubbing their temples going, how can we convince the CEO we need this?
Yeah,
how do we convince accounting?
Right, yeah, that's the real crux of it.
Yeah. So obviously you have some stuff in the works coming out that we have to be a little hush-hush, but things are coming. Is there anything that you can reveal at this point in time, or is say look forward to look at Kess's social media accounts, say at a certain date that stuff will be revealed, or is it also very?
Yeah, so right now there's a lot of talking that's happening and whatnot, so there's not too much I can really reveal yet. But yeah, I would say if you pay attention to our socials, if you follow us on Instagram or Twitter or whatnot, when stuff does start coming out, you'll be the first to know.
All right. And also, just going back to the original video games, what was your favorite? I would assume Sonic 3 and Knuckles was your favorite game growing up, but what was your favorite Sonic game as a kid? Or even today, if that's changed?
It was Sonic 3 and Knuckles, like I said, it was literally a yearly playthrough for me and my buddy until I moved. And then even then he would come visit me, and if he was visiting me that year, that's definitely what we'd run through all the way until Mania came out. Mania now it's kind of a toss-up, but we'll still sometimes even run through Sonic 3 and Knuckles instead. That game I could play over and over and over and over again. I really other than Sandopolis Act 2 is a little annoying for me, I don't see any flaws in that game. I love it so much.
Obviously we talked about possibly putting stuff into Sonic World, possible, fingers crossed for me, expansions. Is there a Sonic game that isn't part of the regular Genesis lineup that you think would be a really cool or deep cut to add? Because I do have a suggestion if you want me to be quiet about it, I most certainly will.
I mean, we're always listening to what the fans want, to what people are excited about. This is a game for Sonic fans, so it's important to know what are Sonic fans looking for. What do they remember? What do they want to see?
I mean, if Sonic Roll were to get expansions, say, I guess you could call it DLC in a sense, because that's essentially what it would be. And this is just me spitballing, but I just think it'd be really funny and really interesting to put a level from Sonic R, the racing game for the Sega Saturn. I know it's a deep cut, and I know the game's not the greatest, but you gotta admit that would be a really funny deep cut for Sonic fans to have a level from Sonic R in the possible next version of Sonic Roll, or at least the expansion pack, if there is one coming out.
And it would mean I could listen to the soundtrack on the way home, because Sonic R also killer soundtrack.
Thank you for saying. Honestly, part of the reason why I just mentioned that is because of the soundtrack. That was another game I had for the PC. I had the PC port, never owned a Sega Saturn. And look, going back to that game nowadays, it's a bit rough. It's very but man, Supersonic Racing slaps.
It does. It's like the level in Smash that you can put that on. That's cranked to 100%.
Yeah, Yeah. And I'm over here like playing Live and Learn. I'm also over here playing like Open Your Heart from Sonic Adventure 2 and 1, respectively. But the second I hear any sort of rendition of Super Sonic Racing or Sonic Boom, I'm like just turning it that up.
Oh yeah, yeah. Sonic Boom's another really good one, and Live and Learn. I remember studying to exams, just having Sonic Adventure 2 in my GameCube, the sound test mode open with Live and Learn playing in the background.
I'm Sonic Boom is like I when I first played and I first installed Sonic CD on my PC when my dad bought me the game and opening that sucker up and seeing the opening cinematic, the PC version of the cinematic, not the Sega CD one, because I watched the Sega CD one on my Sega Genesis 2, the mini one that they came out with a few years ago. It's a little rough. I'm not gonna lie. It's good, a little rough. But when I first saw that animation, I was just blown away. And even that Sonic OVA that came out too in the 90s is with that same aesthetic is just chef's kiss.
Yeah,
And
that
also
was
another reason why Metal is my favorite villain is because he's the main villain of that movie.
yeah. It's funny. My first actual experience with Sonic CD, I had never heard of it until I played Sonic Mega Collection on my GameCube, and then one of the unlockables is that opening cinematic, which yeah, it's such a cool style. The music's so good. I remember watching that like over and over again. And then it was so cool that they brought that style back for Sonic Mania. Another thing that was just an awesome reference, an awesome just love letter to the entire franchise and series is getting that opening animation to look like it did.
Oh gosh, who helped draw? He was also a Sonic Tyson Hesse, thank you, because he also helped design Sonic for the Sonic movies. But he was an artist as well as Tracy Yardley for the Archie and IDW books. Yeah, his animations on Mania were just so amazing, and even like the YouTube shorts that they put up, I'm just sitting there going, "Can we just like get it?" I no shade to the 3D animated Sonic shows; they're funny. The Boom games not that good. The 3DS games are pretty decent, so I've heard. But that show is hilarious. But can we get like animated Sonic like this, please? It's so funny with Sonic. We want certain games to go forward, but when it comes to Sonic, it's like, no, we're fine here. We like this more.
It's so funny. It's my fiance is now that she's worked on a Sonic game, she's played Sonic games and whatnot. She is a huge Sonic girly. Like she's got Sonic shirts now. She bought the Sonic Crocs while we were working on Sonic Roll. Nice. I don't have that one, but I have a few other ones she's gotten me. I should
Yeah,
have worn
I have a
one.
lot. My own fiance, right before we started recording, she came up to me. She's like, "Do you want to wear a Sonic hat?" And I was like, "Nah, it's okay. My hair looks fine." And then I'm like, "Maybe I should have," because you could barely see Sonic and Tails throughout my whole. Audio listeners are wearing my Sonic shirt. That's why, or one of my many Sonic shirts.
But yeah, she showed me some of those animations. Like I'd never seen like the Amy Metal Sonic one. Well, that one's really cute. Yeah, she's like a huge Sonic fan now just because of this game.
Good. Join my I can't tell you how many times when my fiance and I were at Target or we go shopping or just we're just out and about. I remember one time we were at a mall together and she just came up to me and she's like, no, don't go that way. Don't go down that way. And of course I'm like, why? What's down there? And there were just some Sonic toys. I'm like, oh, cool, Sonic toys. And she was like, no, you're going to want to buy them all. I was like, I mean, yeah, but I'm being responsible. Trust me. I'll be fine. Just, just as long as I don't see like anything really, really cool that then yeah. Like even now with the Sonic Legos, because she bought me the Sonic the Hedgehog idea set for my birthday one year.
Oh, very cool.
Yeah, and now of course there's more Sonic Legos out, and I'm just looking at all of them. I was like, and she's like, okay, which one do you really want? I was like, well, I really want the plane, the biplane with Sonic and Tails. Shadow's motorcycle is really cool. And then they announced that they're making one with Supersonic, and I was like, okay, that one too, because I love Supersonic.
Yeah, the Legos. I have a bunch of young nephews, and so I'll usually try to get them Legos for Christmas and whatnot. Like when I go home, but every time in that aisle, I'm like, if it wasn't Christmas and I didn't have any money because I'd spend it all on gifts for my nephews, I might just get this all for myself because it's all so cool.
Yeah, I'm. Don't get me wrong. I'm so glad that this we live in a timeline where stuff like this exists, and now our people because our generation and my next guest on the podcast, G to the Next Level, they're also a huge Sega fan, a huge Sonic fan. And our a little preview for the next episode is we're talking about how good Sonic fans are eating right now. Because I remember back in the 90s and early 2000s, I had to beg and I had to hunt to find any toys related to Sonic the Hedgehog. It was the hardest thing in the world to find. Now, walk into a Target or a Walmart, a plethora of toys. Heck, even like the Funko Pops. It's like, we have a lot of Sonic the Hedgehog Funko Pops now. You're welcome. It's like, where was this when I was a child?
Yeah, we're going through like a Sonic renaissance right now. The licensing team is just they're on point. They're making really cool stuff, making really cool partnerships and whatnot. And yeah, we're kind of feasting. There is all sorts of stuff from the movies, the games, the TV shows. Like Sonic is one of the bigger IPs right now, which is why it was so cool that we got to work with it. Even like it was hearing my boss say we're making a Sonic game. I'm like, Sonic the Hedgehog? Like what?
And there are times where I'm driving around with my fiance and she'd be like, Sonic, I go, where? I'm thinking it's the Hedgehog, but it's the restaurant.
Yeah.
So my final question for you, Anthony, is, I mean, we've been talking about Sonic for a good of the whole episode, obviously. Is there a video game property that if Kess were to get the licensing for, you have a game that you want to make? Now, you don't have to tell me the details of the game, just the like the IP or the property, that if they somehow got the license to insert game title here that you have an idea for that you really want to work on. Is there anything like that at all?
Well, my joke around the office I always like to make is that if we could get anything at all from Nintendo, I would lick their offices the floor clean, like that. I would love to work on Mario or Zelda or something. Like
I had a feeling
Zelda
it was
game.
going to be Nintendo related.
Yeah. Being the Nintendo game, you can't take the Nintendo out of the kid. I would love to make a Zelda game. Zelda, I think, is just so ripe to make a cool board game experience. So that would be a dream one day if we could ever work something out. Or Pokemon, like people will dog in the old Pokemon Master Trainer game, but when I was a kid, I thought that was like the coolest thing ever. It was like, you had the Pogs, it was all the Pokemon. You'd like move around the board, you'd flip it over, you'd roll to catch them. Like I think they did a pretty good job, especially for being the '90s, like where there weren't a lot of board games that were doing a lot more than just you move to the end. Like being able to move around a board and catch whatever Pokemon and build a team, and I thought that was the coolest thing in the world.
I had that game. I had it when I was a kid. I did not understand the rules. I did not know how to play it. It was, to me, a game like that was so. And funny that you mentioned that. I just watched a YouTube video a few days ago on how to properly play that Master Trainer game, because I guess now that Master Trainer game is going for quite a bit of money on the secondhand market.
It's expensive.
It's one of those things where I see it now and I was like, hey, I owned that as a kid, but I got rid of it so fast. And now I don't want to say I'm hating myself, but it's one of those things where I definitely did not understand. Because one of the things, especially with older board games and even older card games, because just recently and actually today, in fact, I'm going to my first ever Pokemon tournament. My Pokemon trading card game, I finally, after 25 odd plus years, I finally understood how to play this dang game, because for the longest time, audio listeners, as I'm holding up one of my holographic Charizards, I had no idea what these numbers and words meant.
Yeah,
and the blood rule book that
I'm sorry. I remember as a kid, just when Pokemon came out, oh my god, like they had to ban it at our middle school. Like everyone just trading the cards all day long. It was funny. I played it when I was a little kid, a little bit, and I have some of my cards that I've like. I think they're on my desk here. They're much less valuable now that I was playing on the playground with them without sleeves. But like stuff like Shadowless Blastoise, which are apparently worth a lot of money now. Like I've had cards just sitting in boxes forever, just out in the open, that I've showed like other collectors, and they're like, oh, "What are you doing? Oh my god!"
They're just like dying on the inside because it's such a valuable and rare card.
Yeah, and it's just sitting in a box in the open for 20 years.
Well, we didn't know. That's the thing. We did not know, and that especially that Pokemon was still being is still huge, and it's still and it's still becoming a thing. Because I remember when I was a kid, the rant that I was about to go on was for the Pokemon trading card game, especially. I would buy so many booster decks. I would beg my parents for booster decks, telling them that I was going to learn how to play the game. I wasn't just going to collect the cards. And every time my brother and I would open up the rule book, it says, "Do not read these rules unless you played Pokemon a few times." And we'll just throw it down. It's like, how am I supposed to play Pokemon if I don't know how to play the game? It's like, what do you mean? Play Pokemon a few times before you read these rules. What do you mean? Do you mean the card game or the video game? Because we had the video games. We just did not know what was going on.
Yeah, they're two different beasts too. I don't think the video game will get you through the card game.
Yeah, but the video game that did help me learn was Pokemon Trading Card Game, the video game. Great way to learn how to play.
I don't think I've ever played that. I think they just released that on something. There's something you can either play it on.
It's on NSO.
Okay, yeah. So it's so funny that era of games where they're making video games based off of card games, based off of video games. It's like Street Fighter, the movie, the game.
Oh God. Yeah, but I hate because for the longest time I thought card game video or like video games that I just hit my microphone. That video games based on card games weren't like the best because there's a bunch of Yu-Gi-Oh card game video games that are apparently really good. At least so I've heard. But then with Pokemon TCG camp coming out, I remember saying like, "Oh, that's not going to be good." And then finally, when I bought it at Portland Gaming Expo a few years ago, and I started playing it, I was like, "No, this is like the tutorial is like this is how you play Pokemon TCG, and it's very clear, concise. It's like this is what you need to do." And I'm just like, "This is just all I needed." And then thinking back, and I was like, "Yeah, but if I had begged my parents to buy me this game when it first came out, they probably would have said no because they would have been like." Why do you need another video game like this? It's like, let's help you learn how to. Even the advertisers was like, you want to learn how to play the game properly? Buy the video game.
Yeah, that's funny. Like, I remember dragging my mom all over town to try to find just a pack of Pokemon cards. I'd be like, "Oh, can we check the Bed Bath and Beyond?" And they would have them too. Like every place in town had Pokemon cards because you had to. I had her drive like from a Myers one time, like on one side of town to the other because they had called and there was like a few packs left. I'm like, "Please, Mom, please, please, please." Me and my brothers were begging her. I can't believe she did it too.
When Yu-Gi-Oh was becoming super popular, my brother and I were watching the anime on Kids WB back in the day. I don't know why, but I saw a pack of Yu-Gi-Oh cards at 7-Eleven, and I thought that's where you can only get them. So I would beg my mom to drive me to as many 7-Elevens as possible to find and buy Yu-Gi-Oh cards. And then one day she brought us home and then she pulled out the 2 starter decks for Kaiba and Yugi, and I became a Blue Eyes White Dragon fan ever since.
Yeah, I did play some Yu-Gi-Oh back in the day too. My buddies got me into it in high school, but they gave me a Toon deck because they're mean, and I had to play that for years.
Yeah, one thing not to throw shade at Yu-Gi-Oh because I still have a fondness for Yu-Gi-Oh. I mean, right now my fiance and I we want to go to McDonald's to try and get the Yu-Gi-Oh Hello Kitty toys that they have.
My fiance also is we're checking McDonald's. She really wants the Pompurin is his name. I can never remember the Sangrew characters' names, and I get in trouble for it all the time. But the Exodia one, I think his name is Pompurin.
Oh, okay.
And when she watches this later, if it's not, I'm in trouble, and I'm sorry.
No, I actually tried yesterday to pick up some of those toys because my fiance wants Hello Kitty as Dark Magician. I want Cinnamon Roll as Blue Eyes White Dragon. Blue Eyes White Dragon is my favorite Yu-Gi-Oh monster. Don't at me.
We actually just got that one.
Oh, lucky. And when I went to my McDonald's yesterday, they said, "Oh yeah, we're out of those toys right now, but we should get more tomorrow." So I'm like, "Hey, honey."
Yeah,
so probably after we're done recording this, and I have some time before my D&D, I'll probably run to McDonald's real quick, get some lunch. I want a cinnamon roll as my Blue Eyes, darn it.
And they're really cute. All the designs are really cute. It's funny. We actually went on a little work excursion 2 days ago. Like the whole game team basically went to McDonald's to get those toys.
I just find it hilarious, and how I also feel like it's now like kind of socially acceptable that since us nerds growing up, we're adults, and there's really cute collectible things that we really like and enjoy. and we could just like go to places like McDonald's to just be like, hey, I'm I'm 33 and I have no qualms with buying a Happy Meal just so I can get this cute little collectible plushie because it's like, look, I like this thing. It makes me smile. And don't give me. I mean, of course, if there's like little kids in front of me, yeah, I'll let the kids have it. I'm not the type of person to be like, I'll punch a kid. Give me my. It's like screw them kids. But at the same time, just hearing that a bunch of people are going to McDonald's to buy these toys is just to me hilarious, but also like you go. That is awesome.
Yeah, I mean, and they know what they're doing, right? Like
Yeah.
it was such a funny thing when my fiance was like, "Oh, I want the Exodia Pomper," and I'm like, "Exodia, like from Yu-Gi-Oh, like Hello Kitty and Yu-Gi-Oh, what?" But they know what they're doing because a lot of adults have been looking for this. Yeah, like we like to collect stuff. We if a little toy you get to have that and it'll make you a little happier. Why not, right? Like
Yeah. Yeah, why not? Or if you have a board game based off your favorite video game franchise of all time, that works too.
that, and like I said, that was why we made it for
Yeah.
Sonic fans to enjoy, to show off, to play. Like that was the goal. And yeah, I definitely I have my fair share of collectibles. There's a little bit of my amiibo shelf here. In the background, I got my Pokemon plushies and whatnot. We have
Oh,
a our room is littered with all sorts of figurines and collectibles like that.
I've been looking. I can see. I mean, and with my background right now, it's most of my fiance's plants. We just moved rooms, so we're still kind of decorating and getting stuff together. But you can't see it, but my desk is currently a mess. Like I have like a little Greymon plushie. I have some Gundam figurines, Transformer. That's the DeLorean from Back to the Future. I even have this guy from Transformers, who's Frankenstein monster. And oh, I do have one little Pokemon that survived, or not survived. I have my little Lego Charmander thingy right
Oh,
here.
nice! I've seen those. Those are cute.
Yeah, I have a Cyndaquil and a Lugia one. I need to build eventually. But other than that, Anthony, thank you so much for coming on here, man. It has been an absolute pleasure talking to you about this game.
Yeah, absolutely. It was my pleasure. Thanks so much for having me.
Of course. Now, Anthony, where can people find you and, by extension, Kess Entertainment on the internet?
So you can find us. Let me look up our socials. I should probably know this, and I'm going to get in trouble
Oh no!
from a
Oh
social
no! I should
media
have warned
here.
I should have warned you before the end. Shoot! I'm sorry.
But we are on Instagram. We are on Twitter. We are on TikTok, I believe.
Oh, you guys are
So
on TikTok too? Dang.
we are at Kess Ent.
Because
At
I
least
know I
on
follow you
Twitter.
guys on Instagram. I know I follow you guys on Instagram. Do I follow you guys on Twitter? I'm pretty sure I do.
I
Or
think
maybe
we're
I
at
don't.
Kess Ent on all three, or Kess. Yeah, we are Kess Ent. So Kess underscore ENT is our
Mhm.
socials. So you can find us there, find all the latest news, find out what we're working on, or just
Yeah.
what we're doing around the office sometimes.
Probably playing some probably playing some Sonic Speed Battle to make sure to be like who decides where to go where for lunch. I assume.
Oh yeah, we're always playing something. We'll if we need a little breaky, we'll pick something to throw down in.
Nice. And remind me one more time. Sonic Speed Battle is available next week, correct?
Sonic Roll is available now. You can find it at Barnes& and Noble. Sonic Speed Battle will be available next week. You can find it again. It'll be at Barnes& and Noble. It should be on Amazon. I believe it might be coming to Target later this year or early next year as
All
well.
right.
So
Yeah.
yeah,
Well, at least
it'll
next
be
week.
available.
Well, at least next week from this recording, because this recording will probably come out a week or a few weeks from, most likely when this episode comes out, the game should probably
No,
already be
well,
out by now,
then run to your local Barnes& and Nobles, and it should be there.
which is what I probably do because that's where I bought my copy of Sonic Roll. Well, anyways, Anthony, thank you again so much. Can't wait to see what you guys have cooking up later on. Obviously, I'm going to get through the campaign of Sonic Roll. I'll get those Chaos Emeralds and actually be able to show off the secret bits and enjoy them. And yeah, and also once I find that Mega Man game, it's coming home with me because I really, really like as much as I love Sonic, I love Mega Man.
I think I like the Mega Man one too. Like I wasn't the designer for that one, but it does feel true to the Mega Man games, and it's a fun game.
Yay! Well, anyways, until next time, Anthony, you have an open invite. If there's anything that coming up that you want to talk about, let me know. We'll set up a recording day, bud.
Yeah, sounds good. Yeah, if you ever want me back, yeah, I'm happy to come back too. So thanks so much.
Of course. And until next time, man, everyone, unpause.